Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre. 23 ceasefire violations in August alone, the latest on Monday, killing 2 civilians as chaos has erupted in the State Assembly. Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah linked the spurt in violence to the cancelled foreign-secretary talks. The BSF has said these are the worst ceasefire violations since 1971. The BJP's Amit Shah quoted the Home Minister Rajnath Singh when he was in Jammu as saying India will give a befitting reply to Pakistan. So we asked tonight, what exactly should that reply be? India has already lodged a protest with Pakistan. The DGMOs of both sides have spoken and agreed to hold flag meetings to diffuse the tensions. Will it work? Also on the show tonight, a special report on one woman's fight against the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Iram Sharmila back under arrest in hospital, being force-fed just 40 hours after she was released. What makes her continue her struggle? Munideepa Banerjee will tell us later in the show. But first, our report on rising tensions with Pakistan, its victims, soldiers killed in encounters with terrorists in the valley, and civilian casualties as a result of Pakistani shelling along the border in RS Pura in the Jammu sector.
Rahul Kumar and Neeraj Raghav, victims of the increased tension between India and Pakistan. Both died on Sunday in encounters in Kupwara. Raghav's family in Bulandshahr, which first wanted to meet a central minister, finally agreed to cremate him after a phone call from the Home Minister promising them a petrol pump or gas agency.
या सरकार की दिमाग में जवान की कोई अहमियत नहीं है। अगर अहमियत होती तो ये लोग जब ही आते। जो 3 दिन से मतलब यहाँ झांके तक नहीं है।
बहुत बड़े-बड़े वादे करके सरकार आई कि अच्छे दिन आने वाले, अच्छे दिन वाले। हमारे अच्छे दिन आ गए 3 महीने में। हमारा भैया खत्म हो गया।
The ceasefire violations, 23 this month, so enraged the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly that it had to be adjourned. Members wanted a discussion on the issue and protection for border villages. Tuesday night was the first peaceful night in a fortnight on the border. The Directors General of Military Operations of both sides spoke at noon and agreed to hold flag meetings at field levels to defuse the situation. But villagers along the border are still afraid.
Village after village are migrating from the international border due to incessant shelling and firing from Pakistan. 2 particular sectors are affected the most. They are RS Pura sectors and Arnia. I'm here at a place called Rangpur in RS Pura, where most of these people have camped.
बड़े बुरे हालत ने, ना दिन को चैन ना रात को चैन, बस डर के दिन कटे दे हैं सड़ी.
These are the weapons on display by BSF. They've been used by Pakistan over the last few days. These are 82 mm mortar shells, the remains of them, and also rocket-propelled grenades and Pika ammunition. All those have been fired from Pakistan, and what's interesting is that all of them bear the marks of the Pakistan Ordnance Factory. The BSF say they are retaliating to Pakistani aggression in equal measure or with weapons of even a higher caliber.
इतना मुंह तोड़ जवाब दे रहे हैं उनको, जैसा वो डीजी साहब ने बताया है कि पहल उनकी है और मुंह तोड़ जवाब हमारा है.
Unless there is peace in these villages and firing from across the border actually stops, flag meetings and political statements mean nothing. With Zafar Iqbal, Ketki Angre, Nitin Gokhale and Sudhiranjan Sen, Amitabh Revi, NDTV.
Meanwhile, the Director General of the BSF, D.K. Pathak, has told NDTV Srinivasan Jain that the recent spell of firing along the international border is the heaviest since the 1971 war. The targeting of civilian areas is unprecedented.
Is this the worst tension that you've ever seen so far, in recent times at least?
Yeah, definitely. It's for last so many years, this kind of prolonged cross-border firing and such a volume of fire had not taken place. We also do not know what started and why it is still continuing, because as I have said that we have made all possible efforts to stop it. We have tried to hold flag meetings. We have tried to contact them telephonically through the established means of
How many times?
4 or 5 times we have tried for flag meeting.
And
after
they didn't turn up?
No, they never turned up. After every incident, we have lodged our protest
And telephonically, how many times have you tried?
Telephonically, at least 16, 17 times.
16, 17 times?
Yes.
And the kind of shelling that's been happening, it's been targeting villages, civilian areas. Again, is that fairly unprecedented?
Oh, yes. This is unprecedented. On our side, I think something to the tune of about 7,000-8,000 villages have been shifted to the safer places.
Do you have a greater freedom to respond this time than in the previous government? Have you been told, just go for it?
I feel that we always had the freedom. There was never a problem. But yes, this time we have been told very, very clearly to respond appropriately.
Right. Well, joining me to take this discussion forward tonight, we're being joined live from Pakistan by the senior political analyst there, Musharraf Zaidi. In Delhi, the BJP's Nalin Kohli joins us. We're also being joined by General Shankar Roy Chaudhary, the former Chief of Army Staff from Kolkata, who's joining us. From Srinagar, Abdul Majid Bande, who is the political advisor of the All-Party Hurriyat Conference, who's joining us. We're also hoping to be joined by Mehboob Beg of the National Conference in the course of this discussion, as well as former diplomat Ambassador K.C. Singh, who will be joining us in the next couple of minutes as well. I want to actually take this first straight across the border to Musharraf Zaidi, who's joining us from Pakistan. Musharraf, you've obviously been seeing the discourse. We've talked about the cancelled foreign secretary talks. Today, the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir is talking about how that cancellation is leading to a spurt in the violence. But what really, in your assessment, is the thinking on the Pakistani side, given the kind of spurt we have seen in ceasefire violations? Give us a sense.
Maya, I think that, thank you for giving me the chance to speak about this. I mean, first off, I think it's really important, especially at a time like this, for civilians on both sides of the border that are interested in peaceful and normal relations between the two countries to try and invest as little as possible in sort of the official national narratives and to try and seek sort of reasonable positions that don't betray the truth too much. So, I mean, I think, you know, from the Pakistani end, what we're hearing on this side of the border, and I think this is important for Indian listeners and friends to at least hear and understand, is that the violations and the uptick in the violations is largely the product of decisions made on the Indian side of the border rather than sort of being prompted by the Pakistani side. Now, this is going to become sort of a he said, she said back and forth, and I don't think it's a very productive use of anyone's time for us to get into that. But I think it's important for Indian friends to understand that, you know, the Pakistani side maintains that a lot of this cross-border action is being prompted by shelling from the Indian side. And as you might already know, there's been a number of civilian casualties and there's been a number of martyrdoms of Pakistani soldiers on this side of the border as well. So I think there's lives that are being lost on both sides, precious lives, whether they're civilians or there are soldiers. They're valuable to us. Our people are valuable to us. And I think every human life should be valued. So I think this is a terrible situation, and it's important to dial down the temperature rather than to raise it.
It's what you said. He said, she said. India is talking about the violations from Pakistan. You're having the sort of opposite view coming in from Pakistan. Nalin Kohli, before I take the discussion forward, I want to bring this to you. Amit Shah was in Jammu yesterday. He's talked about a befitting response to Pakistan. What, in your assessment, is that befitting response? We are looking at a really serious level of ceasefire violations right now.
Well, I think everything has to be seen in perspective. And India reserves, of course, the right to respond as the situation develops. Now, with regard to the time, what you're saying befitting, for example, the talks were called off. Why were the talks called off? Well, we do know that the Pakistani High Commissioner has met with people from the Hurriyat Conference earlier. But this case was when government of India and government of Pakistan were to start resuming the dialogue. On the eve of it, he preferred to call them, engage with them, discuss with them, despite the advice of the External Affairs Ministry not to do so. So therefore, the message carried to us that Pakistan seems more interested in discussing with the separatists than the government of India. So the talks were called off. So in a sense, government of India responded in a way that may have been seen by many people as unexpected. Let's take it to the next level. The Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister is saying that because of the talks not taking place, the ceasefire violations have increased. There can be a counter assessment of the same situation. Because of the internal situation in Pakistan, perhaps the armed forces there feel the need to ratchet up the stress on the border.
Okay.
But I'd appreciate what our friend from Pakistan has said. At the end of the day, precious lives, it doesn't matter of what nationality. Human beings, when they lose their lives in conflict, it's a loss of a universe to a family.
Okay.
And therefore, that is something that neither can celebrate. So therefore, if there is some movement on it, certainly, Government of India's befitting replies to be seen in the point of whatever the situation is, our response will be appropriate.
Right.
In measure and if required, beyond that.
Okay, so we are still talking about a response that would be appropriate without getting into specifics of what that response could be. We do know that the DGMOs of both sides have indeed spoken on the phone. They've agreed to hold a flag meeting. General Shankar Roy Chaudhary, I want to ask you, the BSF has said that this is possibly the worst kind of ceasefire violations that have been taking place along the international border, the targeting of civilian areas since 1971. That's a fairly serious statement. This is something that India and Pakistan are familiar with in terms of the violations that take place along the border at regular intervals. What is making this time so different?
No idea, really. I am as surprised as anybody else because technically along the international border, that is from Kathua, let us say, up to Burajal, the international border, which Pakistan of course calls as the working boundary, there really is no ceasefire because it is a normal administrative political border with boundary pillars and no, it's a normal border.
Right.
With crossing places, with roads, with people moving through the authorized crossing point. So really speaking, one is at a loss to understand what on earth this firing is all about.
Okay, Musharraf Zaidi.
And what do the Pakistani paramilitary forces, what do they hope to achieve?
Okay, Musharraf Zaidi, I saw you shaking your head as the general was speaking. Give us a quick response before we take it to Abdul Majid Bande as well.
Just very quickly, so I think obviously it was kind of the general to recognize that this is a disputed, internationally recognized dispute, and therefore that isn't really an international border by any stretch of the imagination. And that on the point about talking to the Hurriyat leadership, I think probably your viewers have heard this from Pakistani analysts and speakers in the last couple of weeks, but it's really important to reiterate. The Hurriyat meetings are a regular feature of what the diplomats from Pakistan do in New Delhi. They've been doing it for a long, long time. And by no means does it represent a preference to deal with the Hurriyat leaders over and above India. But given that Kashmir is the central bilateral issue, the defining bilateral issue for Pakistan, it is only reasonable to expect that Pakistan will continue to want to engage with leaders from Kashmir.
Okay.
So I think, you know,
right. Leaders from Kashmir, but we're looking at specific leadership from Kashmir. The Pakistani side is not engaging with the spectrum of Kashmiri leadership. But Abdul Majid Bande, do you think that given the way the situation has come to an impasse right now with Pakistan in terms of talks, do you think that it's justified the talks have been stalled for the time being, or is the Hurriyat being made a kind of scapegoat for the fact that maybe Delhi does not want to engage right now?
No, I don't agree with this point that this was the right decision. The calling off of talks was the right decision. In fact, if we look into the whole issue, the borders are very hot right from the time the talks have been called off. In fact, in such situations, you know, in all international situations, there are only two options: either you talk to each other, or you stop talking and there is violence. You know, in this case also, the government of India all of a sudden decided to call off the proposed talks on the just pretext of that the Pakistan High Commissioner talked to the leaders of Hurriyat Conference. As everybody knows that this is not a new phenomenon. People of Kashmir or Hurriyat leaders, you know, we have it has been our stand right from the beginning that we have always supported any dialogue process, and we have always supported good relations between India and Pakistan. And of course, our talking to Pakistan or India would always be on this point how to normalize or how to cooperate with both the countries to develop a peaceful situation in the region.
All right, Mr. Bande, you say you don't agree. Nalin Kohli, I want to bring this back to you. At the end of the day, whether the Hurriyat feels that it was wrong to call off the talks, or Pakistan saying that there's nothing new in talking to the Hurriyat, which is a fair point that the Pakistanis have made, we are seeing a kind of ratcheting up of tensions from across the border as well. We come back to the same point, really, that we talk about a befitting response, we talk about what's appropriate, not appropriate. Don't you think that ultimately the BJP NDA government at the centre is going to have to come back to the negotiating table as well?
There are multiple issues that I'd like to address here, and each one separately, because they are all inbuilt into your question. The first, of course, it is fascinating to note that we are hearing such a lot of importance being attached by our Pakistani friends to talks. I mean, coming from a country where we are daily reading in the papers that the government is not talking to its own opposition there, or vice versa, whatever be the merits, demerits, is their own internal matter. Or, of course, what we see across the other part, the western border of the country. So, I mean, talks is very nice, but there has to be an outcome and there has to be an objective. The second point I'd like to make is that the government of India has changed, and the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, one thing that everyone will have to accept, whether it's at the domestic soil and people are due, and internationally, is it's not going to be a standard business like usual approach. And that's what Mr. Modi is known for. He's known to move ahead. He's known to move ahead constructively, but he does not have time because he feels that the country requires to move on, not be stuck at a certain place.
Okay.
Let me finish.
It's
a sensitive point, so I want to finish this.
Yeah.
So it's not a business as usual approach. So I think that's what Pakistan needs to understand. We've been talking. We've also fought 3 wars. We've also had Kargil, if we do not want to call it a 4th war. We've also had the cross-border terrorism and things like that. Now we can debate it while Pakistan speaks about the niceties of talk. The fact of the matter is that talks have to have a result. Yes, I agree. At the end of the day, you have to talk. But I think just the formality of talking is not. What was the difference here is when I said, one last point, the difference here is that we have to appreciate that Prime Minister Modi extended a relationship before his government was sworn in with the entire SAARC region, and we appreciate the graciousness of the Pakistan Prime Minister to accept and be here.